Yeah, thank you, Chair, and for both the support in the budgetary situation and for some of those updates. I think the main thing to sort of signal today at the start of the meeting, and obviously there's a broad perspective of issues both within Northern Ireland and policing in general at the moment that we may touch on this morning, is our continued concern about the precarious budgetary situation we find ourselves in. So we still have a budgetary gap at the moment of 226 million over the next 3 years, which is effective to take in an organisation the size of my previous police service out of the PSNI and expecting the same levels of service. We have taken some short-term measures, as we reported recently, in deferring a recruitment intake. But clearly, if not addressed, we will have to make some tough choices and prudent decisions around the future type of policing service the public can expect to see. Clearly, we will continue to answer 999 calls, police our streets and deliver neighbourhood policing, but without adjustment, inevitably over time, things will be different. To try and put it into context, this is the equivalent of losing one officer a day, every day, for the next 3 years. So it'll be a trickle at the start and a tidal wave at the end if we don't address this. Clearly, and quite rightly, you will ask myself, and particularly Pamela and the senior team, to come up with measures to try and ameliorate this. But where we face issues at the moment, even if we look at other lines of the budget in terms of contracts and non-pay savings, we are not confident we can balance next year or beyond that in the current settlement, given very well sort of rehearsed pressures around pay, inflation, and some of the must-do commitments that we have as a police service. Clearly, like yourself, Chair, we've been actively engaged in stakeholder meetings to try and ameliorate some of the pressures. As things stand currently, we're not particularly optimistic that this is going to be addressed, and therefore these tough choices will have to be made both in the next few weeks and in the months ahead. On a more optimistic note, and you signalled yourself before, the report does touch on some elements of modernisation. The uniform has gone out on time on Monday, and I think all the feedback I have had has been really well received as practical, fit for purpose workwear, as have the rollout of the new tough books, which I think over time will be a game changer, both for the relationship with the public, how we manage calls, capture evidence and give feedback, but equally the relationship between a patrolling officer and their time spent out in the field. And there's some examples in the report about the benefits we've seen already in that space. Clearly, a matter of concern that has arisen since our last meeting has been the non-processing of fixed penalty notices in our centre in Lishnashara. And I know John Roberts will be able to update in more detail today if needs be. It is clearly regrettable. It was an issue when we've looked at this of part a failing of resourcing, partly issues around system and process, also about how we gain assurance, and also contract management. So these are all lessons that we are trying to pick up at the moment factually before we can come back to the board with a clear plan for remedy. There'll be things Pamela's doing around the use of internal audit to give us that absolute assurance that this won't happen again, and clearly conversations with third parties as well. On Horizon, we are dealing with a range of issues at the moment. Clearly, policing the consequences of EU exit remain a concern for us. There is continued uncertainty in the legacy position, and doubtless today there may be some questions and commentary about both recent and forthcoming Ombudsman reports. I think it's important also to recognise some of the efforts in the last month. The report touches on Neighbourhood Policing Week, where we'll see some pretty impressive figures about reach of social media insight to what neighbourhood policing officers have been doing across the country. Over 2 million reaches in that space on some of our platforms, which again is credit to local policing teams and the drive from Alan and others to showcase in a sort of very transparent way what we've been doing in that space, which I know, apart from being a personal priority, is really important to the policing board. Clearly, in relation to other issues, the focus on policing in the UK remains unabated. There's been numerous headlines in the last few days about behaviour and conduct elsewhere. It's an issue that particularly Mark has been exercised on, and he'll be able to brief later if needs be on what we're seeing as changing patterns of behaviour and sanctions within the organisation in the light of sort of the focus to address sexual misuse of power in the workplace crimes in the workplace, and so on and so forth, so that we'll be able to give you some assurance there about what we're doing. And then finally, I think, Chair, again, in terms of a signal to the future, we share the importance of building a team that is diverse, both in terms of our gender and ethnicity and so on and so forth, as well as skills and experience. It's really good to welcome 2 new senior appointments to the Assistant Chief Constable role that you touched upon. And equally, in terms of some optimism for the future, recent recruitment rounds at the next tier down, Chief Superintendent and Superintendent, I've seen broadly 50-50 splits in the successful candidates. So largely for our next generation, it helps us look at talent management, coaching and support for people to help them to step up. And obviously, Mark himself was only recently back from a director role in the senior command course, where we should be able to share some of that learning experience to try and make that difference. Although inevitably, if our budgetary situation remains unchanged, the trickle of recruitment that we'll be able to afford will inevitably have a consequence in the medium term for how representative we will continue to be in the round. And I'll sort of pause there, Chair.